In accordance with Standing Order 43, the time for member statements has concluded. Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. When did the Prime Minister first speak to his Foreign Minister about the horrific treatment of Australian women removed from planes in Qatar almost a month ago?
The Prime Minister.
Well, as is indicated by the Foreign Minister in estimates earlier today, Mr Speaker, was during the course of this week.
The member for Cowper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management. Today the government received the final report from the Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements. Will the Minister outline the government's next steps and how we are continuing to prepare for and recover from natural disasters?
The Minister for Agriculture.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Cowper for his question? Can I also thank him, and can I thank every member in this chamber in their communities in the way that they supported them through what was a very trying time for our nation. Tragically, 33 people lost their lives. 10 of those were emergency service personnel. So it's fitting that on National Emergency Service Remembrance Day that the Royal Commission into Natural Disasters in Australia handed their report to the Governor-General this morning. That report and that Commission of Inquiry, its letters patent, was signed by every state and territory and the Commonwealth in agreement around what would be looked at in that Commission of Inquiry. It is now appropriate, the Prime Minister has written to every state, that we simultaneously release that report on Friday so there's full transparency around the recovery and around preparedness into the future. And that recovery, in fact, started the very next day after fires went through a lot of those communities. Over $250 million was put out in immediate support payments to people impacted by these bushfires. $1,000 per adult, $400 per child. There's been 4,882 properties that have been cleaned up in partnership with state and federal government, helping that recovery. There was a $2 billion fund created to help the long-term recovery as well. $1.2 billion of that have been spent to date. 29 programs covering from the environment, mental health, childcare, but the signature piece of that is the local economic recovery plans. This was about local recovery, not Canberra recovery. We want to empower the communities to tell us how do they build back better. So $448 million has been set aside to engage and empower communities to tell us how we do that. What is the infrastructure that they need to recover, not only economically but socially? We've also looked to the future. We've said we need to understand these events even greater. $88 million into research and development, not only just understanding the climate, but also equipping our firefighters with the tools to be able to do their job safely. It's also been around technology, telecommunications, $37 million in building resilience in those infrastructure that will keep us safe and keep our emergency service people safe during fires as well. And we've worked with the states in terms of preparedness, trying to harmonise those recovery payments so there's consistency from one state to the next, but also, more importantly, making sure that our warning systems are harmonised, that those symbols that people rely on as a single source of truth to keep them safe is harmonised. Practical measures. We thank the Royal Commission and the Commissioners for their diligent work in understanding that this is a serious issue for Australia's future and preparedness. But our legacy to those that have lost their lives, and to particularly the emergency service personnel, is to learn from the past, but more importantly, prepare better for the future.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister, and I ask, can he confirm that he did not speak to his Foreign Minister about the horrific incident in Qatar involving Australian women until after Senate estimates today? And I further ask, when did the Prime Minister or his Foreign Minister first speak to their counterparts in Qatar to express Australia's outrage about the horrific treatment of these Australian women almost a month ago?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The assertion put forward by the Leader of the Opposition is incorrect.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister has the call.
The assertion was made in the question, Mr Speaker, about the contact between me and the Foreign Minister, and the assertion put forward in that question was not correct, Mr Speaker. And, Mr Speaker,
members on my left,
the Minister for Foreign Affairs set out the timetable of the contact with the counterparts, Mr Speaker, including directly by our our ambassador, Mr Speaker, and with the consular officials and with the government of Qatar, as well as with the Qatar Airline,
Prime Minister,
Mr.
will
Speaker.
just pause for a second. I, again, am going to say to members, when these specific questions are asked, that the Leader of the Opposition and the Treasurer, I am not going to tolerate interjections. It's a farcical situation where specific questions are asked, so I'm trying to listen to the answer, and I have people interjecting and preventing me from doing that. The Prime Minister has the
Thank
call.
you, Mr Speaker, and the timetable for those exchanges was set out by the Foreign Minister today.
The Leader of the Opposition wishing to table a document?
I do, Mr Speaker. The draft transcript from Senate estimates where
No,
Senator
again, I
Payne
refer to my earlier
indicates
rulings.
that
The
she's
Leader
had
of the
no
Opposition
discussions
resume
with
his
it.
seat. The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat, and I've made it very clear when it comes to tabling documents, there is no point tabling Hansard or even draft Hansard. They are available. You've got it in your hand. The member for O'Connor has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on Australia's economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as the Morrison government continues to implement its plans to keep us safely open and drive both job creation and economic growth?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for O'Connor for his question. Mr Speaker, the economic recovery from the COVID-19 recession has begun. It's a recovery that is absolutely necessary for all Australians, whether it be in the member for O'Connor's electorate or anywhere else right across this country. Mr Speaker, it was Standards & Poor's who spoke about the Australian economy beginning to recover when they affirmed Australia's AAA credit rating. Mr Speaker, the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank has also made comments to this effect. Now, ultimately, technically, what the national accounts figures show will be there for us to see in December, and we will wait till that time. But that will not change the actions of the government in responding to the most significant economic crisis this country has seen since the Great Depression. Mr Speaker, confidence is building as Australia reopens. We saw that with the response to the budget, the single largest increase we'd seen since records were kept in response to a budget, a lift of some 12%, Mr Speaker. We have seen it in the Westpac survey, which shows that there are now a key turning point, Mr Speaker, more optimists than there are pessimists when it comes to the Australian economy. And, Mr Speaker, it reflects a bit what the truth is in this House. The optimists about the Australian economy sit on this side of the chamber, Mr Speaker, and those who seek to talk down the Australian economy sit on the other side and constitute the pessimists. But, Mr Australia, the Australian people are increasingly confident as Australia reopens, and the national framework for reopening Australia by Christmas, supported by premiers and chief ministers around the country, is giving Australians more and more confidence. And we particularly encourage and acknowledge again the major change overnight in Victoria. And as Victoria reopens, indeed Australia, Mr Speaker, will be more open as businesses reopen, people get back to work, and there are more steps to be taken, and that national framework ensures that not only does Australia safely reopen, Mr Speaker, that it remains safely open. And that is through the important metrics and measures that are put in place: world-class surveillance systems, quarantine and isolation systems, testing and tracing, and outbreak health responsiveness. All of this necessary to keep Australia open and to keep Australia moving forward. Mr Speaker, the economic recovery plan set out by the Treasurer in this year's budget to the COVID-19 recession, whether it's getting people back into jobs supported by a hiring credit, whether it's the tax cuts that allows Australians to keep more of what they earn, whether it's school leavers who are leaving school very soon, Mr Speaker, and know that there's 340,000 extra training places through the Job Trainer program, the additional university and short course places made available by the Minister for Education, the Home Builder program, Mr Speaker, which is building homes all around the country, Mr Speaker. All of these programs getting Australians back to work. The recovery in Australia has begun and will continue under this government.
Has concluded. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Why hasn't DFAT contacted any of the women involved in the horrific incident in Qatar but left it solely to the AFP? Why hasn't the Prime Minister talked to his counterpart in Qatar? Why hasn't the Foreign Minister talked to her counterpart in Qatar. Why is it that the government knew about this incident since 2nd of October, but it only came to light on Sunday?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The government has registered its strong disapproval and outrage at these events, Mr Speaker. We have done that directly with the Qatari government, Mr Speaker. I am appalled by these events, Mr Speaker. I cannot imagine, as I said today, I shudder at the invasive nature of what has occurred here, and the Australian government will continue to pursue these matters directly with the Qatari government. We have received the assurance that we will have the investigators' report into this matter, and that will be provided to us. We expect to receive that before the end of this week, and we'll be taking further action after we have the opportunity to review that investigative report, Mr Speaker.
The member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australians. The government's own data shows that the waiting list for home care packages dropped by just 2,000 over the first 6 months of this year. At this rate, it will take 26 years to clear the home care wait list. What will the government do to accelerate the provision of home care packages, and by what date does it expect to have provided home care packages to every Australian entitled to one?
The Minister representing the Minister for Aged Care.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Indi, and I appreciate the intent and sincerity and the focus in relation to this. One of the most significant sources of investment in the budget was precisely to address home care places. $1.6 billion was invested to further reduce wait times, and I'm advised that at this point in time 98% of those who are seeking home care packages have either been offered or given access to support through the Commonwealth Home Support Program or the Home Care Program. But we want to make sure that that reaches 100%. And as part of that, that's why we invested $1.6 billion in 26,000 places as part of the budget. Those places come on top of an extra 3,000 places which were announced in recent months, and indeed they come on top of an increase from 60,000 places when we came in government to 185,000 places before the end of this year. So what we are doing precisely to address what I think is a very important and real and significant question is to invest on a scale vastly above that which has ever occurred before. To put it in perspective, there has been a 28% increase in those over 70 since we came into government. There has been a tripling or a 200% increase in the number of places available for home care, and there has been a quadrupling or a 300% increase in the total funding available, from $1.15 billion to $4.5 billion for over the course of next financial year. All of those are immensely important, but at the same time they come on the back of the work that's been done to improve quality, the adoption of quality indicators, the Royal Commission, which the Prime Minister called at his earliest time.
The Minister will just pause and take a seat for a second. The member for Indi on a point of order.
Yes, relevance, Mr Speaker. I'm keen to know what date does the government expect to have provided home care packages to every Australian entitled to one?
Can I just say the member for Indi had a preamble and 2 questions. I'll just ask the Minister to return to the dispatch box. He has the
Thank you very much. And as I indicated, already 98% of those who are seeking home care have received either an offer or have accepted Commonwealth Home Support or some form of home care under the home care, and our goal is at the earliest possible time to lift that to 100%. So that's the direct answer to the question. And then more generally, not only have we made sure that there is a very significant increase, a tripling in the number of home care places, but in addition to that, what we've done is work assiduously on the questions and importance of quality. And I am reminded that today we have no active cases on the best advice received before coming to question time in Victorian aged care, and I think that that's a signature moment for everybody.
The Minister's time has concluded. And I call the member for Flynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development. Will the Deputy Prime Minister inform the House how the Morrison-McCormick government's backing of regional Australia is supporting the nation in its road back to recovery as a result of the global COVID pandemic? Thank you.
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I do thank the member for Flynn for his question, Mr Speaker, in which he refers to the road back from COVID-19, a road which is paved with opportunity, a road which is paved with infrastructure investment, a road which is being helped by the budget that the Treasurer announced this month, Mr Speaker, a budget which was very, very good for regional Australia. And I know all regional members were very pleased on both sides of the House as to what it will achieve and bring to their electorates. Not least of which is the $2 billion road safety upgrades. Many of those will be in regional electorates. $1 billion for the local roads and community infrastructure program. And in the members' electorate, there's the Banana Shire, Bundaberg Regional Council, Central Highlands, Gladstone, North Burnett, Rockhampton, South Burnett, Woorabinda Aboriginal Council, all of which are going to share in $29.6 million under the LRCI program. There's $200 million for another round of the highly popular Building Better Regions Fund, and that has made such a difference for regional communities. And the member for Flynn represents Gladstone. Gladstone is about coal. Gladstone is about powering Australia's economy. Gladstone is one of those wonderful regional cities, the potential of which is unlimited. Now, yesterday there was an opportunity for coal, for Collinsville, for Gladstone that was accepted and adopted by this side of the House. There was one member opposite, the member for Hunter, who had a chance to support coal, to support what we're doing. He missed the boat. The ship has sailed. And speaking of ships, the Gladstone port is one of those deep ports which is providing such a difference for regional Australia. Opened in 1914, 70% of coal exports go from that port. Mr Speaker, 70% of the exports through that port are coal, 50 million tonnes each and every year. And I know the member for Flynn supports that. I know the member for Hunter says he supports that, but we saw yesterday he failed in his opportunity to do so. But our investment in road, in rail, supported through the COVID recovery, our efforts through the budget are going to back regional Australia all the way. And I was very proud this afternoon to launch the Regional Activator Alliance, talking up regional Australia. I know we get plenty of those opposite who are very pessimistic about the future, who talk down regional Australia, who talk down our nation in general. But we're there. We are supporting regional Australia through the budget. We are supporting infrastructure investment, our $110 billion pipeline of investment to support electorates such as Flynn, to support ports such as Gladstone and the city in general, to support jobs. That's what we're about, supporting regional jobs, supporting regional communities and getting on with it.
The member for Kingston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Is the Prime Minister aware that last night the Small Business Ombudsman and former Liberal Chief Minister told estimates the costs of childcare are just too high? It's a productivity issue and it's something that needs to be addressed. Is he also aware, she said, I'm acutely aware that this is not the policy of the government at this stage, but my job is to put on the table what matters to small business.
The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, because childcare is so important is the reason the government made the changes to childcare, Mr Speaker. And as a result of those changes, the cost, out-of-pocket expenses for childcare, Mr Speaker, have fallen by just over 3%, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, prior to that they were rising, that is true, and under those opposite they increased by 50%, Mr Speaker, when their reforms only saw childcare costs go through the roof. Now, we had the Productivity Commission report. We listened to that Productivity Commission report. We crafted changes to the childcare system, which not only saw, Mr Speaker, the out-of-pocket expenses for childcare compared to before the reforms come down, but in addition to that it saw workforce participation increase. In particular, it saw female workforce participation increase to record levels, and it saw the gender pay gap, Mr Speaker, fall to new lows, Mr Speaker. And on top of that, we know that there are many, of course there are, Mr Speaker. Women are incredibly entrepreneurial. All family makers, Mr Speaker, are entrepreneurial. We are the government that has a Minister for Family Business, Mr Speaker. A family business, Mr Speaker, because we understand that when you're running a family business, it requires all of the family's involvement. And the sacrifices that families make as part of those small family businesses are significant. And many of the members who sit on this side of the chamber, Mr Speaker, and the other place, have grown up in family businesses, Mr Speaker. And it's important that family businesses get that support, Mr Speaker, and that's why we made the changes that we did. But as is always the case, in the supports that we provide, we make sure that they're targeted and we make sure they're means-tested, Mr Speaker, and those who need it the most get the most support, and that's what our changes did.
The member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline to the House how the Morrison government's strong economic leadership is helping the Australian economy recover from the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic? And is the Treasurer aware of any alternative approaches?
The Treasurer has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Sturt for his question and acknowledge his time in the wool industry, acknowledge his time working in government, and unlike the previous member for Sturt, this member for Sturt gets his own lemon when he has a G&T, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, this member for Sturt and others on this side of the House understand that the economic recovery is now underway. 446,000 jobs have been created in the last 4 months, 60% of which have gone to women, 40% of which have gone to young people. And we saw consumer sentiment numbers increase by 11.9% this month, the single largest increase in a budget month since the series first began in 1974. We've seen our AAA credit rating reaffirmed, and Australia is one of only 9 countries in the world to have a AAA credit rating from the 3 leading agencies, Mr Speaker. And consumer confidence has increased now 8 weeks in a row, Mr Speaker, 8 weeks in a row, coming back to where it was in the early March period, Mr Speaker. Now, our economic support measures have helped keep Australians in work and save 700,000 Australian jobs, Mr Speaker. JobKeeper, JobSeeker, the $750 cash payments, and of course the cash flow boost, which has supported the working capital of businesses. And I had the good fortune to join the member for Sturt in his electorate at Hibernia Cafe in McGill, Mr Speaker, to catch up with James and the other staff at that cafe and to see firsthand how the economic recovery is underway in South Australia and indeed across the country. Because that business had used JobKeeper, that business had used the cash flow boost, and that business was now graduating out of JobKeeper with the customers coming back as the virus had been suppressed. Now, Mr Speaker, in the budget, it was the next phase of our economic recovery plan, a plan which will see the creation of nearly 1 million new jobs in the next few years, Mr Speaker. And of course, in that budget were tax cuts for 11.5 million Australians. In that budget were further investments in research and development, in apprentices, in training programs like the Job Trainer program, Mr Speaker, and the JobMaker hiring credit, which is designed to help those who are aged 16 to 35 move from the unemployment queue and into work, Mr Speaker. That's what our budget was about, creating jobs across the Australian economy. The economic recovery is underway and Australians can have hope about their economic future.
I now call the member for Cooper.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Is the Prime Minister aware that Mr Gary Barnier, who is being paid $920,000 in borrowed money by the government, bullied a 94-year-old, offered $10,000 of hush money to a family who complained about substandard care, and ran an aged care facility where a resident was found with maggots in her mouth?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I will ask the Minister for Health to add further to my answer. But, Mr Speaker, that information is not available to me, and if the member would like to provide those details and that information, I will undertake to follow up that matter. But the Minister for Health may want to add to the answer.
The Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to take this question. I would respectfully caution the member about making such statements under the cover of this House.
Members on my left.
I think it is one thing that is incumbent on all of us is to treat with great respect the privilege which comes with the ability to use the dispatch box. I'm very happy to provide the information that I have. Mr Barnier has been a member of the Aged Care Funding Authority since he was appointed by the then Minister for Health and Ageing, Senator Jacinta Collins, in 2013. I'm also happy to advise that on his appointment to the current role, the matters raised were considered by the Department and Government during the reappointment process, and I think it's particularly important to indicate that in 2018 the Nous Group conducted an independent review into opal aged care, and the report made a number of recommendations to identify areas for improvement. The report did not identify any wrongdoing or make any adverse findings in relation to the conduct of Mr Barnier, and I believe that that is an important fact before this House.
The member for Wentworth.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Will the minister update the House on how the Morrison government is supporting the health of Australians by investing in critical COVID-19 research and vaccines to assist in our road to recovery?
The Minister for Health has the call.
Thank you very
Minister
much.
for Health.
I apologise, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Wentworth. One of the things which has been incredibly important during the course of COVID-19 is to look at what's happening in Australia and to look at what's happening around the world. What we see in Australia is that in the last 24 hours there were 3 community transmission cases. Globally, we've seen 459,000 cases and the 7th consecutive day of over 400,000 cases. What that shows is that the disease not only continues abroad, it's accelerating. Prior to this week, there had been 1 week where there was 1 day of over 400,000 cases. So the challenge facing the world is greater than ever. Australia, obviously, through its containment strategy, has been deeply successful. We've had our challenges, we've had our agonies, we've had great loss. But by comparison, we've had an extraordinary outcome. But at the same time as the containment strategy, there is also the capacity, which is fundamental to what Australia is seeking to do. And right at the heart of that capacity-building approach is what we do with vaccines. And all up, Australia is investing approximately $2.3 billion in vaccine acquisition, vaccine research and therapeutic and treatment research. In particular, with regards to vaccines, we're investing over $1.7 billion in our 2 lead vaccine candidates at this point in time, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the University of Queensland molecular clamp, developed here in Australia. Both vaccines will be largely delivered through production at CSL's facility in Melbourne, which is an exceptionally important step for Australia. But in relation to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, there have been very positive reports this week of strong T-cell and antibody response to the vaccine. That's a cause of hope for Australia, but it's a cause of hope for the world. And so this is a vaccine where we were fortunate, on the advice of the medical expert panel, led by Professor Murphy and Professor Paul Kelly, with some of Australia's finest experts, to make what appears to have been the right choice. There are no guarantees, but this week's results coming out of phase 3 trials is deeply important. It means that we are on track for first vaccines to be delivered in Q1 of 2021, in the first quarter of 2021. Equally, the results coming out of the early phase trials in relation to the molecular clamp are also very positive. Good T-cell and good antibody results, as the Prime Minister heard on his visit. So the vaccine story is one where we are giving real and genuine hope
concluded. To Australian families. And I call the member for Ballarat.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister justified giving tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to the owners of private jets because they helped ensure frontline medical personnel could get around the country. How many frontline medical personnel did billionaire Clive Palmer carry on his luxury private jet?
The Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, our entire aviation sector will be critical in supporting the broader economy and the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. It supports hundreds of thousands of jobs, promotes competition and ensures services regularly reach all Australians. It is not possible for the aviation industry to hibernate over coming months without adequate government support. And I can hear them yelling out opposite, but this was what the member for Ballarat, the shadow Minister for Transport, actually had to say on the 3rd of April. Now, we acknowledge that it was necessary to provide the support on a sector-wide basis, and we did not discriminate. We did not discriminate between airlines. We did not discriminate between those operating charter flights. And let me tell you that the Royal Flying Doctor Service was also a beneficiary of the support that we have provided. $2.7 billion of support for the aviation sector. And I'm asked about the importance and what has transpired with charter flights. And I've said all along, repeatedly, ad nauseum, that planes in the air means jobs on the ground. And from a practical point of view, every commercial flight, and this is an important point, requires a minimum of 1 to 2 pilots, 1 cabin crew, 1 ground crew, 1 check-in, 1 airport reporting officer, 1 air traffic controller, 1 maintainer engineer, 1 firefighter, 1 airline operations personnel and 1 refueler. So every plane that takes off and lands requires ground crew, requires people to obviously ensure, and you may laugh and you may mock, but the fact is we are providing valuable assistance for the aviation sector.
Members on both sides.
That the Shadow Minister supported then does not obviously support now.
The member for Higgins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. Will the Minister please update the House on how the Australian Defence Force has been deployed to assist the states and territories with returned traveller movement and facilitation?
The Minister representing the Minister for Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question and her keen interest in making sure that we can help Australians recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, the federal government, Mr Speaker, from the very early days of this year have been involved in making crucial decisions. We closed our international borders, and at that stage Defence was involved in that decision, and they helped us carry out that decision. We have made decisions in relation to providing support to a number of areas across the country. In particular, I really want to acknowledge the work of the Australian Defence Force and the work that they did indeed in Victoria. In July, Commodore Mark Hill from the Royal Australian Navy and Colonel Beck Taylor from the Army were deployed to Victoria to provide senior military logistics and planning support to assist the Victorian DHHS in ramping up and improving contact tracing. And obviously there was a real concern in Victoria about the adequacy of the contact tracing, and Defence has gone in to provide their expertise and to provide support to the Victorian government to help it get their standards up to where New South Wales and the other states were. Mr. Speaker, that's been incredibly important. I know, Mr. Speaker, that as of this week there are currently 2,200 Defence personnel deployed as part of Operation COVID-19 Assist, and I really want to pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to the 9,000 personnel of the Australian Defence Force who have been deployed in total throughout the pandemic. It makes every Australian proud to see those men and women in uniform providing reassurance to people in very difficult circumstances. It follows on, of course, from the work that thousands of men and women of the ADF undertook during the bushfire season, the support that they provided to communities to help those communities rebuild, and to provide, as I say, the logistics and expertise that many other organisations, NGOs, etc., just can't bring to the table. And over many years, the ADF has been trained to an exceptionally high standard. We've been able to invest in the ADF because we have put a lot of effort, Mr. Speaker, into getting our budget in order over recent years. We went into this pandemic having really dealt with a difficult situation budget-wise that we inherited from the Labor Party in 2013, and we have worked every day since then, and including in the most recent budget, given that we do have a strong budget position, to provide support to Australians, not just through JobKeeper and JobSeeker, but by putting extra investment into the Australian Defence Force so that they can support their personnel to help Australia move beyond the devastation of COVID-19. I commend the Chief of the Defence Force and all of the personnel. They should be very proud, as we are, of their efforts that have really made a significant difference to Australia's effort to combat the pandemic.
And I call the member for Oxley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. I refer to the government subsidising Clive Palmer's luxury private jet and to his comments about the LNP. As Clive says, "I don't say goodbye to friends I've known for many years." Unquote. When did the government first realise it was subsidising luxury private jets for its friends?
The Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Fire up like you did yesterday, eh, Joel? Yeah, that'd be good. Thank the member for Oxley for his question, Mr. Speaker. In total, more than 1,360 operators have been supported to date, and it's like the JobKeeper program. We didn't discriminate to those receiving JobKeeper. We provided it to all businesses that were eligible. It's like with the
Deputy Prime Minister will resume his seat. Deputy Prime Minister will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Yeah, the Deputy Prime Minister is answering and referring to the JobKeeper program for keeping people in work. We're talking about one of Australia's wealthiest people and his luxury private jet.
The Manager of Opposition Business is not a point of order. I'm going to take that as a point of order on relevance, and the Deputy Prime Minister is 23 seconds into the question. Before I call him back to the dispatch box, just put your seatbelt on for a tick. The nature of questions like this, which are borderline, very borderline, where they're asking about political parties and friends and all the rest of it, certainly mean, from me, there is a much wider tolerance. Okay? I mean, the question could easily have been ruled out of order. It could have been, and I noticed Manager of Opposition Business shaking his head. I mean, if I applied the standing orders, I think I could have ruled it out 5 different ways. Okay? And I won't go through them all now. So I do allow a lot more latitude. And as I've said, we will address this at a later point when it comes to questions and answers, I have to say, and I just give fair warning now. Questions that are essentially political attack statements create a proportionate response, and if the House wants to fix that, I'm more than happy to help. It'll mean the questions will be very specific and the answers will be much shorter. But on this question, the Deputy Prime Minister is being relevant to it, and in fact, even rereading it now, you know, as I said, he's entitled to be answering it in the way he is, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I said, this program has supported 1,360 operators, including the one mentioned, who does employ a lot of Australians. Let's face it, love him or loathe him, he employs a lot of Australians. And we don't ask who goes on his planes. We don't ask. We haven't discriminated.
Deputy Prime Minister will pause. The member for McMahon will leave under Standing Order 94A. And point out to those interjecting, there's a significant number of their colleagues who don't interject, and I'm not going to detain the House by going through all of those. I repeatedly ask not to interject. The Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I don't know why those opposite are engaging in this class warfare. We are getting on with the job of helping all Australians, no matter what their state of income is, through this COVID recession. And what I want to see as the Aviation Minister, the Minister responsible for transport, is more planes in the air. And we could do that by lifting those restrictions on our borders so that we can facilitate more interstate travel. More interstate travel means more planes flying to more destinations and more jobs.
The member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is on policy on a matter related to the Australian people, which is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business. Will the Minister update the House on how the Morrison government's job trainer package is providing critical support to businesses as we recover from the COVID-19 recession?
The Minister for Industry, Science and Technology.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. Now, Job Trainer has been a crucial part of our plan for economic recovery from the COVID-19 recession. It's helping job seekers to upskill and it's providing the skilled workforce that is needed. Now, Job Trainer is a $2 billion investment supporting our businesses, our apprentices, our trainees and our
The member for Bruce is warned.
Job seekers. There's $1.5 billion in wage subsidies to help keep apprentices in jobs and to help the businesses that employ them to remain operational through the impacts of COVID-19. And the other component of Job Trainer is a $500 million co-contribution to the $1 billion Job Trainer Fund. And this is a partnership with matched funding from the states and territories to create up to 340,700 extra training places that are free or at a low fee. Now, these training places are in areas of identified skills needs, and they're for Australians who are looking for jobs, including our school leavers who will graduate just next month. Now, the participating states and territories help determine the priority areas through the National Skills Commission so that training can be focused on in-demand employment areas. Mr Speaker, this is about delivering the skilled workers that our businesses need now for the recovery. So far, every state and territory in the country, except Victoria, has signed up to the Job Trainer Fund. Now, these extra training places are already available in several states. We are continuing to work with Victoria, and we do hope that they sign up. I encourage the Victorian government to take advantage of the opportunities that the Job Trainer Fund provides to them so that they are in a better position to recover quickly. Mr Speaker, Victoria is a great state, and it has been absolutely heartbreaking to see what they have had to endure for the last couple of months, and our hearts clearly go out to the Victorians. But I want to say to the people in Victoria, the Commonwealth Government is here to support you. We are ready, willing and able to provide an additional $130 million through the Job Trainer Fund for around 50,000 training places in both full qualifications and in short courses.
The member for Bruce will leave under Standing Order 94A.
Skills training
It happens when you
is so
interject after you've
important.
been warned. That's sort of how it happens.
Skills
The
training
Minister
is
has the
so
call.
important as we recover from the pandemic, and the Australian government is here to support all Australians.
The member for Oxley.
Thank you, Speaker. My second question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. I refer to the tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars given to billionaire Clive Palmer's company to subsidise his luxury private jet. What are the Deputy Prime Minister and his Queensland mates getting in return? Why hasn't the Deputy Prime Minister asked for taxpayers' dollars back?
That question is out of order. That question Questions cannot impugn motives of members in any way, shape or form. And for those on my left, not approving of the ruling, I refer them to occasions in the past when the boot's been on the other foot and they've been very supportive of the ruling. The member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Education. As our Year 12 students face their final exams and they're looking forward to future employment and study, will the Minister please update the House on how the Morrison government is supporting school leavers to get into training, university and work?
The Minister for Education. Member for Sydney.
Thanks,
Member
Mr.
for Sydney's
Speaker.
warned.
And can I thank
Minister.
the member for Robertson for her question? And I'm sure I say this on behalf of all the House. We wish those Year 12 students this year who are undertaking their exams all the very best. When they started off this year, they had no idea of what was ahead of them, that a pandemic would be thrown at them, that they'd have to spend time outside of the classroom in the Northern Territory. Fortunately for their Year 12 students, it's only been 1 week of no face-to-face learning. In Victoria, it's been many, many months. And for all those Year 12 students right across the nation, we wish you well in your exams, but please understand that this will not define who you are and what you'll end up being. It will also be incredibly important that you are able to pursue employment opportunities, that you're able to pursue opportunities when it comes to university or when it comes to vocational education. And that's why the Morrison government is there ready to help and support you as you pursue opportunities beyond your schooling life. And what are we doing? Well, when it comes to those Year 12s who might want to get a job, through our focus on making sure that our economy recovers, 446,000 jobs have come back over the last 4 months, and we want to keep ensuring that our economy continues to grow and there will be employment opportunities there for you. If you want to go on to university, we're creating an additional, or up to an additional 30,000 places for you for next year, up to 30,000 places next year. So you'll be able to have the opportunity of going to university, and importantly, for those students from regional and rural Australia, there will be extra opportunities for you to pursue those opportunities to go into higher education at regional universities. And we are also ensuring, when it comes to vocational education, that there are opportunities for you. And as the minister before me said, there's our $1 billion job trainer fund. There is also the JobMaker hiring credit that's available, and also those short courses that will be available when it comes to vocational education, and also 50,000 additional short courses when it comes to higher education. So for all those Year 12s out there, study hard, work hard. We all hope that your exams go well, but just remember, the Morrison government is there helping and supporting you by growing our economy, ensuring there are extra places when it comes to university and extra opportunities when it comes to vocational education.
The member for Ballarat.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister said he was proud of the aviation assistance the government had provided to the owners of private jets. Is he proud of the thousands of taxpayer dollars used to subsidise the Leppington Pastoral Company's luxury private jet, on top of the $30 million already delivered to them for land that was worth just $3 million?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm proud of the assistance that the federal government has provided to help the nation recover from COVID-19. I'm proud of the fact that we have put in place $2.7 billion to help the aviation sector. I'm proud of all the measures that we put in place for the budget for regional Australia and to help those transport links. I'm proud of the fact that we have put in place the money for farmers to help them with their on-farm water infrastructure. I'm proud of the fact that we've put in place $2 billion to increase upon the $1.5 billion we had for the National Water Infrastructure Development Fund. I'm proud of the fact that in mid-year we put in place $500 million for the local roads and community infrastructure program, then topped it up. And I'm very proud of the fact that we topped it up by $1 billion in the budget. I'm proud of the fact that we put $2 billion in place for road safety upgrades, which is going to save people's lives. I'm proud of the fact that I belong in a Liberal Nationals government which is getting on with the job of getting this nation out of COVID-19. I'm very proud of that fact.
The member for Bass.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction. Will the minister update the House on how the Morrison government is investing in new energy technologies that will create jobs and reduce emissions? Is the minister aware of any alternative approaches?
The Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bass for her question and her unwavering focus on reducing emissions without compromising jobs or the economy. And I note her strong interest in the important projects in northern Tasmania of Marinus and Battery of the Nation, which the federal government is investing in, Mr Speaker. Now, like all members on this side of the House, she knows that the pathway to meaningful emissions reduction without compromising our economy is through the development and deployment of new and emerging technologies, Mr Speaker. And that's why we're investing in these future technologies. $18 billion in the budget, which we expect to become $70 billion with other investment from state governments and the private sector, Mr Speaker, prioritising 5 main technologies, including, Mr Speaker, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, soil carbon, low-emission steel and aluminium for the manufacturing sectors, Mr Speaker, and electricity storage. Now, all of those technologies have clear, pragmatic goals, Mr Speaker, including goals like H2 under 2, getting the cost of producing hydrogen to under $2 a kilogram, which means it comes into parity with alternative fuel sources, Mr Speaker. And she knows, the member for Bass, that getting these technologies right will support 130,000 jobs as well as the 850,000 Australians in our manufacturing sector. And it'll support, Mr Speaker, reaching our Paris Agreement obligations and supporting other countries to do the same, which is why we've recently signed an MOU with Singapore affirming our joint commitment to bring down emissions with technologies, Mr Speaker. Technology, not taxes, is the pathway forward. Now, I was asked about alternative approaches, and the truth is that members opposite are paralysed by indecision and division, Mr Speaker. They can't work out where they stand on gas. They don't know where they stand on affordable, reliable energy.
For Barker.
They don't even know what their target is for 2030, Mr Speaker. Now, the Paris Agreement requires a target for 2030. It requires it, Mr Speaker. They are walking away from the Paris Agreement. That's what they're doing, Mr Speaker, by not committing to the 2030 target. And just today,
members on both sides,
they confirmed that they have no plan to announce their policies or the targets any time in the future. No plan to even have a plan, Mr Speaker. So now, thanks to the member for Hindmarsh and his obsessive focus on drastic action, they're walking away from the Paris Agreement. Mr Speaker, just last week, a former Labor minister said, and I quote, that what those opposite already know, the member for Hindmarsh was one of 2 people that lost Labor the last election, thanks to his economy-wrecking targets, which were unachievable and uncosted.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm the government announced the $18 million Boosting Female Founders initiative on the 20th of May 2018, re-announced it the next day on the 21st of November, re-announced it on the 17th of March 2020, but still hadn't provided a single cent in grants almost 2 years later by 13 October this year?
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Female Founders Program, which sits as part of the Women's Economic Security Statement, Mr Speaker, and the second of which was included in this year's budget. And the Women's Economic Security Statement, Mr Speaker, not only goes to the challenges of ensuring that we see more Australian women found their own businesses and move forward, but it's also to ensure that more Australian women find their way into STEM skills, Mr Speaker, and STEM occupations, and start small businesses, Mr Speaker, and pursue their own entrepreneurial ambitions, as we see so many do under the policies of this government, Mr Speaker. And that's why the Women's Economic Security Statement has been so important. It's addressed not only their superannuation and their future earnings, Mr Speaker, and the choices they need there, it's also supporting, Mr Speaker.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Lyons, voice I recognise, he's warned. It looks like he was about to walk, but he's okay. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker. We know about the announcement and re-announcements. The question went to whether a single dollar has been delivered under this program.
And to say to the Leader of the Opposition, obviously there was a preamble prior to the question that was asked. The Prime Minister's obviously able to give some context. He's only 50 seconds in, so I'm listening to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now, so, Mr Speaker, I'd be happy to invite the Minister for Industry, Mr Speaker, who can add to my answer on this issue. And I take the interjection, Mr Speaker. I'll take the interjection from the Leader of the Opposition. The only person who needs help in this place is this guy over here, Mr Speaker. We saw that yesterday. We saw that yesterday,
I just say to the Prime Minister,
we saw that
the Prime Minister.
What an embarrassing
the Prime Minister
from the Leader of the
will
Opposition yesterday.
Prime Minister does not have the call.
Mr Speaker.
Prime Minister will resume his seat. Now, Prime Minister, your microphone wasn't on, so I'm taking it. Well, if you want me to call the Minister, I'll need to hear you. Yes, so
I'll ask the Minister to add to my answer.
Thank you very much. The Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm very happy to answer this question and add to what the Prime Minister has already said. This was an announcement that was made in 2018 that the funding would flow in 2020-21. Now, what we have said very clearly, is that we were going to go through a process of consultation. And, Mr Speaker, this has been answered very comprehensively in Senate estimates this morning. Would you just be quiet?
Members on my left. Leader of the Opposition. The Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And it was answered very extensively in Senate estimates this morning when Senator Deb O'Neill sought to rely on a press release issued by me where the bottom part, where it talked about when the funding was to be rolled off, was just not visible in what she was trying to rely on in Senate estimates. So she was prosecuting a myth. This funding is now in the process of being finalised, ready to be rolled out. There were 2,200 applicants for this funding. Our process has been very solid, very transparent, and it will deliver in the very near future.
The member for Ford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia. Will the Minister please update the House on how the Morrison-McCormack government's commitment to our resource sector, which is of critical importance as we come out of the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia.
Well, thank you for the call, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the honourable member for their question? And the member for Ford is another strong supporter of the resources sector because, quite simply, Mr Speaker, it drives jobs in the member's electorate. Now, the member tells me that the cat distribution centre is in the member's electorate, and they are cats that purr, Mr Speaker, not the type you're thinking of course. Cat being short for Caterpillar, that very well-known company that provides heavy engineering equipment right across the resources sector. So, Mr Speaker, once again, the resources sector continues to drive jobs across the economy, whether they are direct or indirect. Mr Speaker, mining is in Queensland's DNA. It is in Queensland's DNA. It is a big driver of jobs in that region, and I want to thank again those working in the sector because they are keeping the lights on in this country. They are driving our economy. They are providing more opportunities. They are providing more jobs, and we are supporting them, Mr Speaker. We are supporting them. An extra $153 million in the budget this year to explore and develop Australia's resources even further. We continue to drive new gas development. The Beetaloo Basin, for example, Mr Speaker, one of our first strategic gas basin plans, and reported in the media today, Mr Speaker, and I quote, as the hottest play in the planet. Right now, the hottest play in the planet in terms of gas exploration. So that is jobs into the Northern Territory, that is jobs for Australians, that is potential to drive down the gas price across the board over a longer period of time. We need to make sure we get the balance right there, Mr Speaker. But once again, it provides jobs for individuals in Queensland. Now, Mr Speaker, I was recently in Rockhampton at a resources town hall run by the Assistant Minister for Northern Australia, Michelle Landry, and I met Jack. Jack was a young man who was a very proud man of the job that he had, and he told me it is his dream job. Now, he started his career as a cleaner, and he is now a drone operator at the Adani mine in central Queensland. A drone operator at the Adani mine. Now, that job exists, Mr Speaker, because on this side of the House we support the resources sector. We support mines like the Adani mine. We support the jobs that they drive. And people like Jack represent the heart and soul of the industry. He's proud of his industry, he's proud of his job, and he's done the right thing. He's out there working hard for our country and himself and his family. Now, Mr Speaker, we will continue to see things like those opposite and those in Queensland showing up with borrowed hard hats and high-vis shirts. They're not theirs, they've been loaned to them. I'm absolutely sure of it. We know that in Queensland there are challenges. There are challenges in terms of approaches to this type of policy. Mr Speaker, and I quote once again, media today indicated that Deputy Premier Stephen Miles in Queensland has been caught out again, and I quote, a damning social media post surfaced of him criticising Queensland.
I just say to the minister, resume his seat. The question did ask about alternative policies, but under the practice that refers federally. And we've had a number of questions from my left. We've had some answers. Let me sum it up. I'll be glad when the Queensland election's over. But I'll just call the minister and ask him to be relevant to the question.
And we know that those opposite are absolutely against the sector. We saw them yesterday move a motion to stop us delivering on our commitments to the sector, to stop us from committing the money that we put forward, we committed to in the election. Shame on them.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry. Can the minister confirm the government has spent $3.8 billion on defence helicopters with doors too narrow for the troops to fire guns and rope out the door at the same time? Why has the government spent billions of dollars on helicopters that are not fit for combat?
The Minister for Defence Industry has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the opposition defence spokesperson. Mr Speaker, the MRH-90 helicopter referred by the member opposite does meet defence objectives. And it's no secret that this helicopter has had some technical challenges in its time. And the member opposite may like to know that both Minister Reynolds and I have both been working very closely with industry and with the department to make sure that we do overcome these challenges, to make sure that we have the capability that our men and women in uniform deserve. But, Mr Speaker, let me be clear. We know that this is an incredible capability for our Defence Force. And I'd like to take a moment to quote General Angus Campbell from the Senate estimates yesterday, where he said, "This is an extraordinarily advanced helicopter which can do things that no other helicopter on the planet can do." Mr Speaker,
members on my left,
we on this side are very proud of our $270 billion investment in our defence capability. They are world-class, technically advanced, and every now and then we experience challenges. But we on this side are committed, and we're up to the job. We're committed to our men and women in uniform, we're committed to our capability, and the Australian public know that we on this side can be trusted to make sure that our defence has the capability that it deserves.
The member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General and the Minister for Industrial Relations. Will the Minister please update the House on the results of the Morrison government's ongoing efforts to foster a more cooperative approach to industrial relations, and why this approach is so important as we recover from the COVID-19 recession?
The Attorney-General and Minister for Industrial Relations.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for his question and acknowledge his expertise in this area. The JobKeeper program has so far provided $69 billion worth of support to over 900,000 businesses and around 3.5 million workers. And that support, of course, financially was absolutely critical, but it wasn't just financial support, because the JobKeeper changes included genuine policy reform in the Fair Work Act to provide what are essentially unheralded flexibilities to businesses during COVID-19. I mean, common sense things like the ability to direct flexibly on hours and location and duties and times of work during this pandemic. And last week, an independent report was tabled in this parliament which looked at the way in which those industrial relation flexibilities assisted businesses. And I think it shows two things, that report. First, that the provisions, the IR flexibilities, were very widely used by employers. They helped businesses adapt quickly during that very difficult time. And secondly, that the types of flexibilities that help businesses survive during COVID can also help them thrive and regrow as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what that report showed was that 3 out of the 4 eligible employees, so 3 out of 4 of all eligible employees actually used these flexibilities, and 8 out of 10 employers said the IR flexibilities were either important or essential to maintaining operations through the pandemic, and 8 out of 10 employers said that the IR flexibilities were either important or essential to keeping their staff in work. So in number terms, that means about 500,000 businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic found those IR flexibilities were either important or essential to maintaining their operations through the business and to keeping people in work. And we have extended those flexibilities to the second round of JobKeeper, and in a limited but very important form with flexibilities and protections. We've extended those flexibilities even to those businesses who were in JobKeeper but are now growing out of the problems that they had. And it wasn't just employers who made their contributions known to this report, it was employee representatives. So one employer noted for this report, without these provisions we wouldn't be open. The provisions were the difference between being able to continue to operate and not. And an employee representative is quoted in the review as saying, "It has been an overwhelmingly positive program for workers." So the challenge now is to grow and foster that cooperative ability to make real changes to legislation and our practices to grow more jobs.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I ask the further questions be placed on the notice paper. And, Mr Speaker, having just discussed the matter with the Leader of the Opposition, today is the National Memorial Day for Fire and Emergency Services workers. There was an important national memorial services held early today by the National Council for Fire and Emergency Services. And I'm sure all of us here would like to join in remembrance of those, particularly over the last 12 months, who have lost their lives defending their communities, their families, and our incredible nation, including those who came from overseas, friends from overseas, and who also paid the ultimate price. Those names who were remembered early today, Mr Speaker, those 14 responders, and we remember their families who live with their losses each and every day. Philip Bell, Ian Long, Robert Panitz, Jeff Keaton, Andrew O'Dwyer, Sam McPaul, Colin Burns, Ian Macbeth, Rick DeMorden Jr., Paul Hudson, Bill Slade, Matthew Kavanagh, David Moresi, George Baldock. We thank them for their sacrifice and we remember their families.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr Speaker. I join with the Prime Minister in paying tribute to these great Australians, but also those who came from across the sea to help us during the bushfire crisis. These are people who, contrary to the natural human instinct to run from danger, run to danger, towards danger, in order to protect us and our communities. We thank them. We thank their families for their sacrifice. We honour their sacrifice, and we remember them today and each day for what they have done, and we remember also their comrades who they work with, because all of them will be continuing to miss them each and every day, particularly when they go out in service, and may we have a better and safer season, the one forthcoming, than the one that we went through over the Christmas and New Year period.
As a mark of respect, I ask all present to rise in their places. I thank the House.